Beneath the shining lights of an American skyline, a quiet revolution was taking place. Crowds had gathered, some out of curiosity, others out of skepticism, all waiting to see whether the whispers and headlines about Africa's breakthrough invention were more than just clever marketing. A sleek vehicle rolled onto the stage, its design futuristic yet practical, but what made it extraordinary wasn't visible from the outside. This was the first self-powered EV from Africa, a machine that promised to rewrite the rules of transportation. For years, the world had placed Africa on the sidelines of technological innovation, rarely acknowledging the ingenuity brewing within its borders. Yet here, in the heart of the United States, the narrative was about to change. Engineers and investors leaned forward, watching every detail, waiting to confirm whether this was hype or history in the making. As the car hummed to life, there were no charging ports, no signs of hidden fuel tanks, no cables. Instead, it seemed to breathe energy from within, guided by a system so unconventional that it challenged everything people thought they knew about electric vehicles. The driver, a young engineer from Nairobi, slipped behind the wheel. With a simple turn, the car accelerated smoothly, gliding onto the streets as cameras flashed and drones circled overhead. The silence of its movement was uncanny, a car traveling without the tether of charging stations or the weight of fuel. Onlookers whispered, some in disbelief, others with wide-eyed fascination. Within moments, the vehicle was cruising down a major American boulevard, its very presence asking a bold question. Was Tesla's dominance about to be shaken? The story of this machine was as fascinating as the technology itself. It began not in Silicon Valley or Berlin, but in workshops powered by determination rather than billion-dollar funding. The creators had faced doubt, financial challenges, even ridicule, yet they pressed on. Now, their invention was no longer a secret confined to the continent. It was on display before one of the most demanding markets in the world. The implications stretched far beyond a single car. If this technology proved scalable, the need for costly charging infrastructure could collapse overnight. Entire industries built on fossil fuels and batteries could find themselves on the defensive. The businessman who had brought the prototype to the US watched intently from the sidelines. He understood the weight of this moment, not just for himself but for the idea of possibility. The question wasn't only whether the car worked, but whether the world was ready to accept that the future might come from somewhere unexpected. A few miles into the test drive, the real challenge began. Steeper roads, higher speeds, the kind of trial that would expose weaknesses if there were any to find. Yet the car pressed forward, steady, seamless, as if powered by an invisible force that defied expectation. News outlets scrambled to capture the unfolding event. Reporters on the ground broadcasted live as the car glided through intersections, its quiet hum cutting through the usual roar of city traffic. Social media lit up in real time, hashtags trending within minutes as people around the world demanded to know, what was powering this car, and why did it seem unstoppable? Crowds gathered along sidewalks, cheering and waving as the driver accelerated, weaving seamlessly into the rhythm of American streets. Inside the vehicle, sensors monitored every detail, transmitting live data to engineers stationed nearby. The numbers were astounding. No dip in power, no signs of strain, no dependence on charging stations. The car's self-sustaining system appeared to deliver exactly what had been promised, something many had dismissed as impossible. For skeptics, it was a moment of silence. For believers, it was vindication. Within hours, major networks ran headlines that bordered on disbelief: African EV runs without charging in US streets and a Tesla killer. Investors, once hesitant, began flooding inboxes with inquiries. Rivals, especially those in the electric vehicle sector, reportedly held emergency meetings. Could decades of dominance be unraveled by a team that had begun with little more than vision and persistence? But as the car made its final loop back toward the demonstration stage, the mood shifted from spectacle to realization. This wasn't just a car, it was a symbol. For too long, innovation had been treated as the privilege of a few powerful nations. Yet here was proof that ingenuity could rise from unexpected corners of the globe and shake the foundations of entire industries. Back at the stage, the young engineer stepped out of the driver's seat to thunderous applause. He raised his hand not in triumph, but in quiet acknowledgement. The businessman beside him leaned into the microphone, his voice steady but charged with conviction. "Today," he said, "isn't just about a car. It's about rewriting the story of innovation. It's about proving that the future is not owned, it is created, and it can come from anywhere. The crowd roared, and as the lights dimmed over the event, one truth became undeniable. The automotive world would never be the same again. Even before the applause faded, phone calls were being made behind closed doors. Executives at established automakers were alarmed. Tesla's board of directors reportedly demanded a full briefing on the technology that had just been demonstrated. Rivals in Germany, Japan, and South Korea began analyzing every second of the footage, desperate to find weaknesses, some even suggesting it had to be staged. But the live telemetry data that had been streamed to independent observers left little room for doubt. What had just happened was real. By the following morning, government agencies in the US were already stepping in. The Department of Energy scheduled an urgent review, while lobbyists from oil and electric power companies flooded Washington with warnings of economic disruption. This wasn't just an invention. It was a threat to multi-trillion-dollar industries that had thrived on the assumption that energy would always be consumed, always paid for, and always controlled. Meanwhile, the young African inventor and his team were invited to Silicon Valley for private meetings. Venture capitalists, once dismissive, now competed fiercely for a chance to fund the project. But behind the offers of billions lay a darker undercurrent. Some proposals weren't about scaling the technology. They were about shelving it, locking it away, and ensuring it never saw the light of day. Public opinion, however, was already on fire. Videos of the self-powered EV cruising effortlessly down American streets had gone viral, with millions demanding answers. Comment sections were filled with questions like, "When can I buy one?" and "Will this end gas stations forever?" For the first time, ordinary people, not just experts, felt they were witnessing the beginning of a new chapter in history. Tesla's CEO, pressed by reporters, finally broke his silence. "We've always welcomed innovation," he said carefully, "but extraordinary claims require extraordinary scrutiny. Let's see the data." His cautious tone barely concealed the pressure mounting on his company, as investors compared his words to the undeniable visuals flooding every platform. Governments outside the US also began to react. In Europe, energy ministers called emergency meetings to discuss what this technology could mean for their economies. In Asia, automakers who had spent billions on battery research suddenly faced the possibility that their future models were already obsolete. And in Africa, where it had all begun, pride surged. Headlines declared it a technological rebellion, proof that the continent could not only contribute to the future but define it. The stage was set for a global showdown, not just about cars, but about who would control the very lifeblood of modern civilization, energy. Behind the scenes, sabotage was already being whispered about. A series of suspicious incidents followed the debut: an unexplained lab fire in the African startup's original workshop, a data breach that wiped months of technical logs, and sudden visa complications for the core engineers when they tried to travel to key international conferences. Journalists who dug too deeply into these coincidences found themselves facing lawsuits or mysteriously losing access to their sources. It was becoming clear that the arrival of a self-powered EV had not only challenged science but had rattled the very foundations of global power. Yet, despite the resistance, momentum kept building. Independent scientists, curious and unafraid, began replicating parts of the technology in their own labs. Small prototypes appeared on YouTube channels run by hobbyists and engineers, proving that the concept wasn't smoke and mirrors. Each video attracted millions of views, further cementing the reality of the breakthrough. The more skeptics tried to discredit it, the more credibility it seemed to gain. Ordinary people began to take action. Grassroots movements formed online, demanding that governments fast-track approval for the technology instead of blocking it. Activists pointed out that a self-powered car could end reliance on fossil fuels, reduce carbon emissions to almost zero, and even transform developing nations by breaking the cycle of expensive energy imports. The message spread fast. This wasn't just about cars, it was about freedom. By now, the young inventor had become a reluctant global figure, courted by presidents and billionaires, yet still wary of the dangers. In interviews, he spoke less about fame and more about responsibility. "If this technology only makes the rich richer," he warned, "then we will have failed. It has to belong to the people." His words resonated, echoing through protests, talk shows, and university lectures. And then came the tipping point. In a highly publicized demonstration, a fleet of a dozen self-powered EVs drove across state lines from New York to Washington, D.C., without stopping once for fuel or charging. Crowds lined the highways, waving flags and cheering as the cars glided past, almost silent, but carrying with them a noise louder than any engine, the roar of change. When they arrived at the Capitol, thousands were waiting. Cameras captured the moment the inventor stepped out of his car and addressed the crowd. What he said next would not only spark a political storm but force the world to decide whether it was ready to embrace a future no one thought possible. He stepped onto the stage, the air electric with anticipation. The young inventor didn't speak like a politician or a CEO. He spoke like someone who had fought for every breakthrough and understood what was at stake. "This car is not just a vehicle," he declared, his voice carrying over the crowd. "It is proof that we can live free from the chains of fuel, from the monopolies that profit while our planet suffers. This belongs to humanity, not to corporations, not to governments, but to you." The words sent ripples through the audience. Chants erupted, signs were raised, and within minutes, the moment was trending worldwide. Hashtags demanding energy freedom and power to the people dominated social media, with millions of shares in hours. It was no longer just a demonstration. It had become a movement. But in the corporate towers that lined Wall Street and in the boardrooms of the global auto giants, the reaction was far less celebratory. Executives gathered in secret meetings, their voices sharp with fear and anger. "If this scales," one oil magnate growled, "our entire industry collapses." Plans were whispered, legal battles, lobbying campaigns, smear tactics. Behind polite smiles, the machinery of resistance was already turning. Meanwhile, governments found themselves in a delicate position. Some leaders praised the breakthrough, eager to align with a future powered by innovation. Others, tied too tightly to fossil fuel lobbies, hesitated, wary of disrupting the balance of global economics. And in the shadows, intelligence agencies began quietly monitoring the inventor, weighing the risk of one man holding the key to energy independence. Still, momentum surged. Universities requested access to the technology for study, while grassroots groups organized crowdfunding campaigns to build open-source versions. Engineers across Asia and Europe began experimenting with similar designs, eager to adapt the idea for their own markets. The technology was slipping beyond the control of any single company or country. And just when it seemed unstoppable, a shocking development shook the movement. Late one night, the inventor's personal lab was broken into. Prototypes vanished, hard drives were stolen, and the security cameras had been mysteriously disabled. By morning, rumors spread that the technology was compromised. Some claimed rival companies had seized it. Others whispered about government involvement. The headlines were filled with one question: who now controlled the future of self-powered cars?